Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. This video is about Marcella Herrera, who was killed in a hit and run in Chicago, and her fiance who was injured. I make these videos more than just, feeling sorry for the victims. I make these videos to also show that the pattern is real. The consequences for not rallying to me are real. If people were trying to stop them, these tragedies would be much smaller tragedies. The biggest tragedy is that 8 billion plus people worship the devil and aren't trying to stop the main people who worship the devil on the planet. So where Marcella has the word Mark in it, Mark cell alpha, right? Or Ram cell alpha, rather. And Mark L.A., right? L in hell, El, the Canaanite deity, right? Looks kind of like a nerd or something. A Jewish nerd or something. And, there's crypto Jews all throughout the Middle East, or crypto L's, or whoever these people are. Herrera, right? Her error, he error, Hera, her ear alpha. And so, if you're a nerd and you bred a bunch of nerdy, crypto nerd females, we call them that. I'm not trying to insult anybody here, just trying to explain it. Some very nice people are best described as nerds, perhaps. I get filmed. Anyway, so I'm going to have to make another clip here. A lot of you don't understand that back in 2023, there were something like 623 or so homicides in Chicago. Now, the person who killed that female in a hit and run, probably did it on accident, probably isn't going to go down as a homicide. So there's a lot of people being killed, and they're not even being recorded as homicides. That's significant here. You see, I'm going to go ahead and put on the screen some pictures of a certain gentleman who's trying to make peace in the streets of Chicago. He's in a neighborhood I believe is run by vice lords, and they're a very famous Chicago gang, one of the larger gangs there. As you could tell, they're not messing around. And you can imagine being the top martial artist on the planet, even in 2025, right? There's a lot of people who, have hands, as they say, they're quick with their hands, they're very coordinated, very strong, very clever, very witty, and very street styles as well. Okay, so it's not just martial artists that I've challenged, it's also, these street guys who might very well try to rob me or kill me if they lose, what have you. So my challenge took a lot of heart. I'm showing up there by myself, what have you. And again, I'm not moving the slightest because God is with me. I'm the most deadly, what have you. So let's look at how the Marcella case is connected to the Epstein case. So you have a female brought up in the Epstein video, the video about the one of the survivors speaking out. Okay, she brings up Maria Farmer. She brings up Sarah Ransom. Think it's a coincidence? Not a coincidence. The word ransom has the word ram scrambled into it. Okay. Ra and some, ransom. Sarah, right? Sehar, scrambled. And Maria, like Maria Mello. Farmer. And the farmer goes back to, the northern Norteños gang, right? How they're associated with Cesar Chavez's historic movement. And the farmer's part, I believe is called. I'm being fumed here. I don't remember this right now, but I still have a lot of information I do remember here. She also brings up that J.P. Morgan settled for $290 million with at least a lot of the Epstein victims. $290 million. And J.P. Morgan, is very much, connected to the famous J.P. Morgan, who was this rich person, who's said to have been a Rothschild lieutenant. Okay, and the Illuminati is more than just the Rothschild. So when I say Illuminati, I'm not talking about a conspiracy theory. Okay, I'm talking about the factual, historic organization in the encyclopedia and the types of people who continue their philosophy. For example, you have Greek frats and neo-pagans. Neo-pagans continue pagan philosophy from before. You have people from their various cults. People who continue Druidic rituals. They continue, Roman rituals and so on and so forth, right? People with statues, right? These are people who continue the work of the Illuminati in their own way. And they were an Enlightenment era organization. And they're basically best described as rich whites, Jews, LGBT people. So you can see that the fumes were making it so that I have difficulty speaking. Again, I have 23 witnesses on record to the psychological operation against me. Okay. And the victim of the Epstein human trafficking resembles a neo-pagan because New Age people are basically neo-pagans, right? It's a bit more complicated than that, but it's about that. And of course, all that stuff is clearly incorrect, and it's there to make people look like idiots, while people in suits and privileged groups pretend that they're ideal, just like they're fuming me to try to make it so I look like an idiot or something. Okay, when everyone knows that rich people who are greedy, rich people are privileged who are allowed to look good are fucking idiots. And due to the lack of them being men, and if they're females being women, okay, I'm going to go ahead and cut this video short because they're fuming me heavily. They're not man enough to let the Son of God speak without being persecuted and fumed and poisoned. That is bitch. So compare like these rich white people, for example, to the gangsters historically, gangsters in LA who are tougher, not just anyone in the gang, but tougher, kind of more clever guys. It is impossible to respect the governing class when you think about just the idea of a tougher, more clever guy, or more smart, on the highest level, more wise, moral wisdom. It is impossible. You think Epstein and Bezos, you think they deserve more respect than people who are straight gangsters, for example? Not that I necessarily respect gangsters past a certain point, I don't, because they don't obey God. But they're more respectable than some punk-ass frat fucking bitch. I mean, give me a break here. Okay? And so when these worms are persecuting me, there's a certain disdain that I feel. They did things to that female that are unbelievable. She brings up, what she believes, right? Or at least her state argument. She's a New Age shill to some degree. No offense to her. But I'm going to go ahead and say that because I've got to correct you on what you're doing. What you're doing is you're playing the New Age game where you're putting out what is best described as disinformation in regards to that particular point. Okay? The person you saw, I think she said it was Epstein. He didn't turn into a fucking reptile or something, right? That's stupid. You hallucinated. And because the person who interviewed you brought up that they have technologies that are occult means hidden, so the technologies can be occult. Okay, that person brought that up instead of you, and I'm glad that you came forward with whatever honest information you did, but I don't appreciate that. I understand why you did it, right? Maybe it was part of your deal to get the settlement. Maybe that's how you get them to leave you alone. Okay, I see that you're going through trauma. That's rather unfortunate. Okay? Where the heart of Christ should go out to you, to whatever degree it does. But it's wrong to confuse people about the fact that people are not some kind of weird, bogus, I'll go ahead and say the word, alien. Hopefully they don't take me out of context, right? Because I do not believe that they're that. Okay? And the wordplay shows us that they're not that. But she shed light on Area 51. One thing that I can respect a lot is that she brought up the fact that Epstein's place in New Mexico, he has several places, one of them was in New Mexico, was by Area 51, right? And that the government, they shed light on the fact the government has technologies to create things that appear to look like UFOs. People were seeing unidentified flying objects, okay? But they're not aliens. So we have to make the distinction between that female, okay, who looks thrown off, what have you, who admits that she's in a state of trauma, okay, and someone who's not in a state of trauma, someone who is the top martial artist ever possible, who put his money where his mouth is in a society where they don't care if you're mentally ill or not. If you make a top martial arts challenge, you offer enough money, they're going to show up. They're going to try to beat you, maybe try to rob you. That's a serious distinction that has to be made. A brain surgeon's son with a martial art wordplay points to me, Marshall is marital scrambled, and I Christ am the top martial artist. And somebody talking about something that, if it wasn't for hallucinations, that you basically shouldn't believe. But yes, they're poisoning her, probably still, right? They were poisoning her then, rather, and they're using technology in society in general, and they were using technology on her then. I'm having trouble speaking here, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. But that is something that you all should take very seriously. If the Epstein list wasn't out there, maybe not the list because they're covering up, if Epstein wasn't someone who was acknowledged to have human trafficked with these celebrities and these pictures, you might not believe that person. And the things that she was saying are a lot harder to believe than the things I was saying in my Illuminati playlist, which was my first official playlist on YouTube. Okay, even though, excuse me, because they're all factual. I connected it in a very scholarly way, where the evidence and the sources were overwhelming. In fact, I was in college at the time, and the college I went to put a very great emphasis on references and sources, and they wanted APA format and so on and so forth. So I was very familiar, and I'm very familiar with the idea of valid sources versus invalid sources, though sometimes valid sources, even peer-reviewed sources, can be full of shit. They can be Eurocentric garbage. You cannot trust scientists, and oftentimes they don't agree on everything. You can trust me, and you can live by sound logic. Don't confuse, some propped up worm who says he's an academic with sound logic based decisions, Okay, so I'm having trouble speaking, and you could see that. I don't, sometimes I have no trouble speaking in my videos. They're fueling me heavily. You should know what the fuck I'm saying. You can't trust some fucking Noam Chomsky type of person, okay, even though he might be a more believable version of his mold. You got to look at things in terms of sound reason. These guys are allowed to be famous for a reason. Why?